Hey everybody, Jeff Tidwell here with another one of my tweet videos for you today. It is Saturday, March 14th, 2020, and we are diving back into the past, going back to June 2019 to look at some tweets. As always, I can be found on Twitter at RealJeffTidwell. I'm also on Gab, Minds, Parler, Telegram, and Instagram. If you're not watching this video on YouTube, you're watching it on BitChute. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoy the content, please do like and subscribe. Hit the little bell below for notifications. Leave me a comment below with your thoughts and observations. And if you find my cadence to be a little bit on the slow side, you can hit the 2x speed button and get all of the information in half of the time. Time is the currency, of course, and that is double bang for your buck. So without further ado, let's get into some Twitter stories. So earlier in the week, I had solicited Twitter, my friends and others, for Twitter stories. These are stories, anecdotes, stories of censorship, social media drama, whatever you'd like to slide into my DMs and send me or tell me a story. Some people did respond, and I actually have a friend here, Jesus Gibba. So Jesus slid into my DMs, and we had a little bit of a chat, and here is that story for you today on Jeff Tidwell's channel. So Jesus says, "Hello, how are you doing? And nice to meet you as a friend." He then says, "Hello." I say, "Hello. How are you, friend?" "I am well. How are you?" And Jesus sends me a sad face emoji. He says, "I am so sad and worried today, bro." And I ask, "Why are you worried?" My friend, "No worries. Hakuna Matata." Jesus responds, "Bro, as you can see, it is now 2 days we are out of food at home, and my little siblings are crying a lot about hunger, and I am so sad and worried about them. They are so young. To stay for 2 days without eating, bro. We your kindly hand. We your kindly hand." And he sent me pictures of his family. Jesus has a very nice family, it would seem. And they're putting up little signs that say, "We need help. We need help." So then Jesus says, "Bro, as you can see, we have no food to eat at home. And we really appreciate anything you can help us from your good heart. I know your heart is bigger than your stomach." And I respond, "I can send a check. How much should I send?" And Jesus sent me a heart emoji. And he responds, "Bro, you can help us with $250. So I can give you my full information address, bro, where you can able to help us through." And he sends me to a site called worldremit.com, a money transfer website for sending money online. And he says, finally, "The easy way to help us out, bro." I respond, "Web link does not work. Bro, let me try this button here. 1 sec." And I blocked him. So thank you very much, Jesus, for sliding into my DMs and delivering that Twitter story. I really appreciate the content, and thank you for reaching out. I hope we speak again soon. But in the meantime, let's get into some tweets for today. It is Saturday morning after all, and I guess that is why you are here. So welcome, thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoy. So we're going to start today with a tweet that I actually referenced last night on Twitter, saying that I would be speaking on this today, so I will. And it's on language. Language evolves. When we aren't allowed to say a word in any context, that word retains innumerable power. That word retains innumerable power if we can't say it. Watching speech evolve from acceptable to unacceptable and back, including those who initiate change, when, why, and how. When we watch speech evolve from acceptable to unacceptable and back, we're gazing mechanisms of control in action. For better? Sometimes. So, this is discussing the fact that as human beings, our language evolves. What was said hundreds of years ago, even decades ago, hell, even a couple of years ago, is no longer the parlance for today. Some of these terms are now outdated. Some of them are seen as hateful or negative. Others just, well, they went out of style. So language certainly evolves. But what we're seeing is a lot of cases where we're not allowed to say a certain word. Now, usually somebody will say, as we discussed in the last tweet video about culture of nice, they'll say, well, you want to be more polite. You want to be more polite. And that's why you can't say this word. It's just not the correct decorum for our society, for this particular household, for this business. There are certain things naturally that we just, well, if we use our better judgment, we don't say them, obviously. But that means that the word that we're not allowed to say retains innumerable power. That means high levels of power. It retains a value that, you're not allowed to say it. So because of the scarcity, value is generated with that word. And so people do, I'm not saying that people are looking to say offensive things and that offensive words hold value. But of course, when you're talking about humor, where the off thing in the situation can certainly provide a bit of the engine that can drive the humor. Offensive words can just be funny because they're not supposed to be there. And humor also often involves things that shouldn't be but are. Exaggerations and circumstances that are not normal. And because they're mixing reality up and making it more amplified in terms of entertainment value and interest, of course, it's funny, it's interesting. So language evolves. When we aren't allowed to say a word in any context, that word retains innumerable power. So, of course, when we watch speech evolve from acceptable to unacceptable and back, it really does raise a number of questions, including who initiates the change, why they do it, how they do it, and when they do it. These factors all matter as to, we're looking at a situation where people are seeking, of course, money, power, influence, and whatever other things they're striving for. They are using potentially the modern religion of censorship to ensure that the Overton window of acceptable dialogue is smaller and smaller. Now, they might do it on a professional level, a personal level. They might say, hey, you work here, you can't say this, you're under an NDA, you can't use certain things, or you might be under an agreement of some other kind that's not non-disclosure, but it's something else. In a household, your parents or your friends, your spouse or your siblings, whoever it might be, they will tell you, well, you shouldn't say this, it troubles me. I'm giving you, again, it's being polite, it's being respectful, it's honoring your loved ones to not say certain words. So of course there's situations where people are going to, tell you not to say something. But when it's broader, when it's not just on the micro level, but it's actually on the macro level, when it's not just in the household, but it's society at large, and these mass messaging platforms such as the mainstream media and the internet, social media, and all these places that make it clear that certain terms are no longer allowed. Well, you have to question why. Why are these terms no longer allowed? And of course, they usually give an explanation of hateful conduct or something else. I can't even, you can certainly do the research yourself and leave me a comment below with some of the reasons you've seen censorship online. But usually it has something to do with hate speech, which is not a thing. Check out my video, Hate Speech is Not a Thing, on YouTube and BitChute. And they talk about these things that are very amorphous, subjective terms and place them into an objective set of rules called a terms of service, for example, that dictates what you can and can't do, but keeps it broad enough so that somebody at a higher level, of course, these, in the case of social media, they're skirting the line between platform and publisher, but this is the publisher side where they're curating and they are determining what they want to have on their platform, but really those curation rights are those of a publisher. And of course, they have no liability for publishing things that may be illegal or hateful or whatever it might be that people just don't like. They don't have any liability. In fact, they're subsidized by the federal government. And so it's not the same as a platform where you don't have any liability. Publishers should have liability because they have curation rights. It's sort of unbalanced the way it is now. But I do talk about that in a number of my videos. I do a video, I believe it's The Internet is the Modern Public Square. And I talk about Facebook and Twitter, Instagram and YouTube, these massive platforms that have a lot of sway over acceptable dialogue and what is allowed. And because they're so popular, they do, over time, with these narrowing Overton windows of acceptable dialogue, they are directing what is okay and what isn't to say on a grand scale. And frankly, when they get you in that little tunnel there's only so many pathways we can go down. When you eliminate words, you say you can't use this word, you can't use that word. You eliminate words across the spectrum, and that narrows the paths you can take forward. And also, once people start to look at you and they start to follow the dogma of the modern religion of censorship, you will get disciples that want to turn you and I, and even a few of their friends and family, into martyrs of the modern religion by excluding them based on, or chastising them, or making an example out of them based on the words that they use. Now, of course, we talked a little bit earlier just now about how, of course, it's polite when you're in somebody else's presence to treat them with respect. So please don't see this as some sort of blank check to be an asshole. I'm not trying to advocate in that direction, but I don't want people determining all of a sudden that you're not allowed to use a certain word when just a day ago that word was okay, and hell, maybe tomorrow it might be okay again. So it's all about control. It's gazing mechanisms of control in action. When you see how the people are initiating change and messaging that you're not allowed to use certain words or certain terms. And it can be for better sometimes. There are certain cases in our society where we have eliminated the use of certain words in popular dialogue because they were tinged with malevolent otherism or hatred, maybe sexism or racism. And since we are trying in general to eradicate or slow the flow of racism and sexism and misogyny and misandry and all these things in our society, we are actively trying to create a sense of unity, humankind together. We have had to make some sacrifices to our language because we can't use these terms broadly anymore. And I'm okay with that. I'm sure many of you are okay with that. There are certain cases where you say, okay, well, let's make a judgment call here, and the consensus is we shouldn't be saying this. That's fine. But one case that I saw recently was with and it's the topic on the top of everybody's mind in America and the world at large, and that is coronavirus. Coronavirus is the popular term for it, but Over time, we've seen the Chinese government try to change the messaging around coronavirus because they would like to not accept the blame for the virus spreading in the first place, which is totally fine. I would do the same thing if I were in their shoes. And I actually agree we should not be casting blame at this time across the world. We should be trying to fight and destroy this virus and mitigate it, quarantine who we need to, and save human lives. But at the end of the day, with the Chinese government looking to change the window of acceptable dialogue and say, you can't talk about how it originated in Wuhan, China. And you can't call it the Wuhan virus. You can't call it the China virus. And I say, I'll call things whatever the hell I want to. Okay? Now, I don't have any sort of otherist tendency. I just don't want anybody telling us what we can and can't say. That triggers me. I'm frankly rather nigh atheistic on the modern religion of censorship. So, and I know that language evolves. Language evolves. So what I can't say today, perhaps I can say tomorrow. Who decides that? And who decides what the definition of free speech or hate speech should be? The fact is, I don't decide. You shouldn't trust my opinion. It's just my point of view, my perspective. And you shouldn't trust the prophets and popes of the modern religions to guide you unless you'd like to place faith over reason. And I don't judge religious individuals. There's a lot of merit to religion and for the devoutly secular and some secular individuals as well, non-secular individuals. You can, of course, also believe in a modern religion. And I don't judge. We don't judge on this channel. But at a certain point, you do have to stand your ground and push back. And we'll talk about that in one of the next tweets today about standing your ground and not playing the victim. So we see speech evolve from acceptable to unacceptable and back. And those initiating change are the ones in power. And of course, you want to follow the money. If a large government or post-governmental entity is saying, hey, you can't say this, well, they have an incentive. They have money, power, influence, all these different things. And maybe they're coding it, they're giving it moral cover by saying, it's for the better of humankind, it's for the better of the people. If we don't point fingers, if we don't create xenophobia or xenophobia or racism or sexism or whatever it might be, they'll have a moral cover for it. And they might be right. But at the same time, we all speak. We all have the God-given human right of free speech. And we cannot be controlled by other people. It's just not a good road to go down. I'm not going to call it a slippery slope, but it is, it will have, of course, a counterforce to counter the inertia of speech destruction, of language destruction. But once they narrow those paths, once that Overton window is narrowed, those paths are narrowed, it limits where you can go. And then people start to fall in to that code that tells them what they can and can't say. And some people are more susceptible. They're more apt to put faith into that and to continue to allow their neural pathways to be modified. They create blocks. Imagine it as 10 tracks. And those 10 tracks represent all language. Hell, 10 tracks, 10 fingers. How about that? And over time, when people close certain tracks, ultimately you only have 2 or 3, a dwindling number of options. And when you only have a few options, we're easier to control. There's fewer things to account for in terms of probability and possibility. So if we happen to be in, say, for example, a media macro simulation where the media is culturally engineering, Google is culturally engineering everyone you talk to, really all of us, we're all being brainwashed every minute of every single day by ourselves and others. But some of it comes from, within, some of it comes from around us in our physical space, but a lot of it comes through the television set, the radio, the smartphone, the laptop. It comes from the media. Media. And we have to be cognizant of it. I'm not saying that anybody is, mind blind or brainwashed in a way that is separate. We're all brainwashed. We're all brainwashed. It's just a matter of understanding where the seams are, where the lines are between what we believe and what is real. And I like to constantly remind myself and others of that on this channel. It's part of what this is all about. We like to calibrate ourselves and make sure that we are balanced in faith and reason, and frankly everywhere else. Balance is the goal. So we see that the government also tries to initiate change through telling you what you can and can't say sometimes. You'll see it through politicians that try to direct the dialogue, try to create a system where, well, if you say this, you're an otherist, you're a racist. If you say this, you're anti-science, or if you say this, you're pro-science. Obviously, there's both sides to every question, and other sides as well, but the two sides in the dualistic manner. But there's a lot of people trying to get us into those 3 tracks. Down from 10, now we have 3 tracks, 2 tracks, and ultimately there's nowhere to go without social ostracization. I might have mispronounced that. But they can't, you start to get locked in. There's only so many paths. And that's where we start to see the real social conditioning come in. Just the other day, I called it the Wuhan virus on Facebook, and a few friends sprung up to chastise me and ask, well, what's your motive for calling it the Wuhan virus? And I said, what are you talking about? It came from Wuhan, China. Isn't that enough? Why do we have to all agree on the same exact term? Why do we have to lock ourselves into that one path forward? Shouldn't we as Americans have freedom, liberty, options? I don't know. You tell me in the comments section below. So, language evolves. Things that were said hundreds of years ago, or even last week, may not be allowed anymore, and we should be aware of why and how. So, onward and upward. So this next tweet here is a named tweet. This is called Infantilization Engine. It's a pretty conceptual tweet, but I will work with you and with myself to get it out. Infantilization engine. So the machine starts with us stating this about ourselves: I'm a victim. And then we have this modifier, abundance. When we have abundance in our lives, we see this thing about being a victim, being a loser, and the abundance is everyone gets a trophy. And then we have insulation. When everyone gets a trophy and everyone wins, you have this thing, insulation. Criticism is hate. But then you also have, on the other side of abundance, we have scarcity. And in scarcity, the opposite of abundance, not everyone gets a trophy. So then we turn to emotion, pathos. Our first thought is, perhaps, hate is why. Because if criticism is hate, and not everyone gets a trophy, hate could be the reason. Probably could be the reason, right? So then we turn to ethos. We turn to morals and ethics and a choice, moral choices, ethical choices. And the person says, I'm disassociating from hate. I won't be in the group that hates. I won't be identified as that hate group. With criticism is hate in this scenario. It continues here. And this is all the machine. This is step by step from ethos to association. And we say, we are the oppressed. So we are being criticized. We are being hated. So we are the oppressed. And finally, projection. You're a victim. You're a victim. So it's a cycle. It begins with I'm a victim and turns into others are victims because we have empathy and we also tend to project what we feel internally on the outside world. It's just not everybody does it to the same degree or the same level, but we all have this tendency to see ourselves in others. We love it when others mirror us, and others love when we mirror them. We're a very monkey see, monkey do species in the end. So infantilization engine, I would definitely check out the tweet on Twitter so you can see the formatting for it. And it makes a little bit more sense to visualize the tweet that way, but I will walk through it again. So it starts with this victim mentality. Now on this channel, Jeff Tidwell, we like to advocate for individual agency and personal strength, individuality, and a personal journey towards enlightenment and finding our blind spots, our merits, our flaws, and just looking at us as individuals, human beings, and not looking at us by the group that we're in. We're not winners, we're not losers, we're not in any group by immutable characteristics. We judge by character on this channel, what we all bring to the table and who we are. Not our identity, but our actions. Our actions should define us more than any sort of immutable characteristic, anything we can't change. Actions are something that we enact in tangible reality. So that's where I like to get us started. And I don't like to appeal to third-person effect on this channel. I don't like to assume I know what other people are thinking. So I'm not making any sort of specific, I'm not saying that everybody acts the way that the people in infantilization engine do. I am just making a broad statement about victim mentality and how we can see ourselves as victims and that can hold us back. So I'm a victim. And then you get into this abundance culture of everyone gets a trophy. So everyone wins. There's no meritocracy. If you do well, you get a trophy. If you do poorly, you get a trophy. And this is the sort of equality or equity that you find in the modern religion of social justice. This sense that, hell, if we're all even, if there's no contrast between those that succeed and those that have failed by, for their own reasons, for their own merits or flaws, or if it's just bad luck, or if somebody else has screwed them, however they do, if everybody wins, no matter how well they do in the situation, no matter what challenges they face, no matter what pushback they receive from the world, the outer world inertia pushing against them. I talk about that a little bit in my tweet, Free Willy, my video as well. Check it out on BitChute. Actually, no, it's not Free Willy. Check out that video as well, but it's a video called How Do We Measure Intelligence? How Do We Measure Intelligence has a little bit about how outer world inertia versus our inner world agency can determine in some ways how intelligent we are. It doesn't rely on certain proxies, like, for example, people like to talk about IQ. I don't think IQ is a perfect proxy or the only proxy by any stretch of the imagination for intelligence. There's emotional intelligence. There's so many other forms of intelligence that have nothing to do with IQ. So it doesn't matter how intelligent you are, how lucky you are, how much merit you have, how many flaws you or I may have. In an abundance, everyone gets a trophy. So with abundance comes this sort of insulation from reality. You don't get to see the downside of things. You don't get to see the darker hues, the darker tint of what the world has to offer. Because you have things. You have things. If it's an abundant culture, if you have abundant goods and resources, there's no sense of what the downside is. There is no downside. So you're insulated from criticism when everyone gets a trophy. And in that sense, criticism becomes hate. Criticism becomes hate. And it's such a contrast to what you've, in this insulated environment, expect. This safe space, this culture of nice, where everyone wins. Of course, any contrast to that sticks out. Any contrast to the culture of nice, which we talked about in last week's tweet video, it totally sticks out. So then you get hit with the world, the reality of the world, which is scarcity. We live in a world of scarcity. We don't have infinite resources. That is a fantasy, of course. And so we have this reality where not everyone gets a trophy. And that's just the way that it is. Not everyone gets a trophy. There are winners and losers, especially in a capitalistic world, a meritocratic world. There has to be a loser. It's all about mitigating your losses, folks. You know, we're all going to lose a lot. But Scott Adams has a book called How to Fail at Almost Everything and Still Win Big. How to Fail at Almost Everything and Still Win Big. And he talks about how you can lose 99 battles and still win the war. It's just about mitigating losses and knowing which battles to choose and so on and so forth. Definitely check it out. But not everyone gets a trophy. And so then we go into pathos, which is emotion. We talk about that in one of my other videos, Kelp Me, Kelp You. That's available on YouTube and BitChute. We talk about how, in very basic philosophical terms, we have pathos, ethos, logos, and kairos. But I use pathos here to say that our emotional reaction, our first impression is often, not always, that things are happening due to hatred. But in this case, we have a situation where criticism is seen as so negative that it's a form of hate. And so when not everyone gets a trophy, you say, well, criticism's hate, and so hate is why I didn't get that trophy. There's something about me that they just don't like. That's the first impression of some people. Notably, if they're a victim from the start. They start with that phrase, I'm a victim. From the very beginning, you're starting from, the low ground. You don't have the high ground for the high ground maneuver. Fans of Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, might remember. You really want to have the high ground, and it can be tough if you place yourself on the low ground. Anakin Skywalker can let you know all about that. But you place yourself on this high ground. Hate is why this is happening. Hate is why I'm a victim, and I'm not used to criticism. Hate is why I didn't get the trophy. So what they do is then they disassociate from it. They disassociate from the hate. They don't want to be involved. We don't want to be involved with hate. We want to be involved with love. And we're insulated. We're used to a certain culture of nice, a certain safe space echo chamber where we are infantilized, essentially. Infantilized. We see ourselves as victims, And because we see ourselves as victims in this scenario, others will see us that way too. They will accept the frame that we have placed for ourselves, because if we believe it, of course, it's easier for them to believe it. And of course, if they're doing their due diligence as a family member or friend, they might say, hey, you're bigger than this. You're no victim. You're a winner. Get back out there, champ, and make things happen. That's what a very motivational or optimistic friend or family member might do. So the ethos part, when you go pathos, hate is why, then ethos, I'm disassociating. I'm setting moral boundaries, I'm setting ethical boundaries, and I am pushing away from this hate. I am putting myself in the good group, not the hate group. And of course, when you put yourself into a group, if that group is the oppressor group, where they're being hateful, they're being too critical, they're going too far, the opposite of that group, of course, is the oppressed. We are oppressed. I'm a victim. We are the oppressed. This is our identity. This is our association. This is our group. And that's kind of what we do as human beings. We get into this tribal mentality, this either-or mentality. It's really hard to stay away from that. Like, I like to circle the middle. I like to try to be a little bit on both sides of any given question. Hear them both out. It's the ideal. It's not always practical, and it's not always realistic to do that. Sometimes you do want to come down on one side or another, but I try to listen. But they get into this association that they are the oppressed. I'm in an oppressed group. And of course, if they follow the modern religion of social justice, of course, that makes it a whole lot easier. We've already got them labeled. And depending on what country you're in or what your situation is, what your immutable characteristics are, and how you relate, you're either in one group or another. This is what collectivism is all about. Tribal mentality is all about. I have a new video out, Grouping Thoughts. Check it out on BitChute for more on that. But finally, once a person is in that group, we are the oppressed. We identify as oppressed. They want to expand that group. And they want other people. We know people, again, we are windows to the world. We are windows to other people. Artists especially create a window for you to look through and see through the artist's eyes. See how they have an impression of the world and how they view it. So at the end, you have projection. At the end of the final step of infantilization engine is projection. I'm a victim, and therefore you're a victim. If you're like me, and I see myself in you, I see myself in everyone, but I especially see myself in other victims. So what we see is people, the crux of this, and I've been a little bit long-winded on this tweet, is that when we identify as a victim, we do want to expand our group. We want to expand. It's almost like a biological imperative, an impulse to grow, to replicate, and for us to survive. And so, even though we may see ourselves, and again, I don't advocate that we do see ourselves as victims. I think that we should focus on becoming more based, which means to not give a shit about what anybody else thinks or says of us, and kind of go our own way and do our own thing. And of course, work within the boundaries of acceptable society where people are, happy with us to some degree. We don't want to become completely nihilistic and misanthropic, but we do want to stand our ground, have our own value system, and not just go along with the pack. At least that's what I advocate on this channel. But if you're projecting, if you're a victim, if you see yourself as a victim, if I saw myself, I would project what I feel on others, because I would imagine, well, empathy, sympathy, and empathy, I feel what others do. and this is projection in itself, but we're talking about a specific scenario here. You're a victim, and I want to help you. It's not because I see you as a victim, not because I don't like you, not that I see you as a loser. I see myself as a loser. I see myself, and I see myself in you, and what it does is spread this mentality of, well, we're all weak, so we have to collectivize. We have to get together, and, you know, to me, it's inward looking. It's not outward looking. It's not a growth mentality. It's I'm small, therefore let's create a larger form out of more smallness, where we should be lifting ourselves up. We should be trying to become bigger in ourselves. So ultimately, infantilization breeds more infantilization, and ultimately, nobody feels empowered. Nobody can really stand up for themselves. They have to rely on the group to come together and basically brigade others. And so there's a lot to unpack here, but it begins and ends with I'm a victim, you're a victim. And frankly, if we step aside from the infantilization engine and we don't consider ourselves the victim, we look at ourselves as a player in the game. We look at ourselves as someone with merit that may have come upon hard times, but we have a bright future. That's the kind of messaging that I like to promote here. So I'm not trying to judge. If you see yourself as a victim, I want you to know I believe in you. I think that a lot of people have had a hard time in their lives. It's been out of their hands since they were children, that their parents may have abused them, their teachers, their brothers and sisters, family, friends, and perhaps society at large, perhaps the government, perhaps other forces came and didn't give them a fair shake in life. And so they have a perpetual victim mentality. But I'm here to say that I believe in you. That's why I say all this stuff. I believe in everybody. And I don't think that it's good in the long term to see ourselves as victims. I think if we start to engage and to realize we only got one shot on this earth, we have one chance, one long chance to get it right and to find self-actualization, to find happiness and prosperity. And we have to roll with the punches, but we can't stay victims forever. Eventually we have to push into the wider world and fight and overcome that mentality. So, a friend of mine well, we're not personal friends, but we've certainly corresponded, Zuby, at Zuby Music on Twitter, talks about victim mentality a lot. And because we get a lot of messaging, this is counter-programming, by the way. This channel is counter-programming to a lot of the stuff you're hearing in the media, where they talk about privilege and people that have been, institutional racism and things like that. You're being held back because people are racist. Some of it's true and some of it's false. But I like to, and of course institutional sexism as well, but I like to say, don't see yourself as a victim. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. We believe in you. And you should too. So Zuby talks about that quite a bit, and I enjoy reading his stuff. So, I think it's about time for today's sponsor, Corona Beer. It's crisp, refreshing, and hey, if you enjoy this ad, make it go viral. Corona Beer. There's no need to fear Corona Beer. I'm okay. Good stuff. Onward and upward. Says here, I said, I would talk to NN Taleb, but he blocked me. Something about being anti-fragile. Okay. Tweets. So I wrote this tweet for World Refugee Day, and I assume that there may be some conflicting opinions about this, so please definitely leave me a comment below with your thoughts and observations, accolades and criticisms alike. But we're going to go and talk about this. So I say here, best not conflate illegal immigrant and refugee. Goes well with not conflating illegal immigrant and asylum seeker. And of course, not conflating immigrant with illegal immigrant. With that said, we should treat actual refugees with dignity and respect. So, about a year ago, past couple years, we've been dealing with the backlash, the pushback to the presidency of Donald John Trump in the United States of America. We are coming up on an election this year, the 2020 election, so you're seeing a bit more of a focused attack on the president through the coronavirus outbreak crisis that was just a national emergency announced by the president. Talk of closing borders, travel bans, and of course the Democratic left, they've gone ahead and called a lot of this xenophobic over time, racist, and so on and so forth. And that tends to be the line of attack for the past 4 or 5 years. And I remember because I was a Jill Stein voter and a Bernie Sanders voter back in 2016, I said a lot of things that were orange man bad. And over time I learned and discovered in myself that I actually did like the president to a relatively large degree, to the point where I would call this a Trump positive channel. I think he's doing an okay, if not good, if not great job with the coronavirus, but your mileage may vary. We don't have a real comparison point because while analogies are easy to make, and I did vote for President Obama twice, and believe that he was a good president, we can't really go back to Ebola or H1N1 and talk about how he handled those versus how President Trump has handled coronavirus, because, I mean, you could make some comparisons, but frankly, analogies are bad because it's a different situation. Past does not determine the future. It's not set. It just informs the future in many ways, but it doesn't set the future. So, talk of borders. We've been talking about borders a lot again. And over the past few years, we've talked about the Mexican border, the Canadian border, and the border, through flight and through boat, through maritime and all these things. But people tend to advocate and say, we have refugees that want to get in, asylum seekers. Think of the children in cages. These are the kind of words and terms you hear past few years, and many of them have continued over time to maintain their place in the rhetoric of Democrats that are anti-Trump or want to see a Democrat elected president of the United States, like Joe Biden. So I say best not conflate illegal immigrant and refugee. Look, illegal immigrants are people that come here and don't honor the systems of our country, don't honor the law of our country. And instead, they might be desperate. I'm not saying these people are, they're desperate. And then again, a lot of them are human traffickers or drug traffickers. And a lot of them do rape women. Many women, a large number, 66%. I think we lowballed it at 33%, but it's around 60-something percent, 70%. 2 out of 3 of all women that cross the border illegally are raped along the way. That's a great cost for this thing that's illegal in the first place, which is illegal migration. We have laws, we have ports of entry, we have all this stuff in place in the United States to make sure that we have sovereignty, that we have a country where people can feel safe and citizenry means something. So people say refugee, and refugee is a specific term. You can certainly go on to Google or DuckDuckGo or Wikipedia or perhaps a more credible place online and find out exactly what a refugee is. But it's somebody that is escaping a troubled situation in their country. It's not economic migration that you're allowed to just illegally go wherever you want because your country is not doing well economically. Usually it requires a disaster of some kind, an event to take place. So people conflate refugee with illegal immigrant. We were getting 100,000, 120,000 people crossing the Mexico-American border about a year ago, around March to June 2019, and around the time of this tweet. And once measures were put in place to slow that, the Mexican government, the military, started to help out a bit with getting things done and holding people accountable and not allowing them to cross the border. The numbers dropped dramatically. But, we have to take care, we want to take care of refugees. We don't have to, we want to. But illegal immigrants are not refugees. So we also don't want to conflate illegal immigrant and asylum seeker, because there are conditions for asylum. You don't just get to come here 100,000 people at a time from other countries and get asylum. It's just not how it works. It's hard love. I don't have any problem with the people themselves. It's about the law. It's about law and order. It's why our country is so great, And you can, of course, argue in the comments below. Is America great? Yes or no? Drop me a comment below with your thoughts on that. But yeah, illegal immigrant and asylum seeker are not the same thing. And of course, we don't want to conflate immigrant with illegal immigrant. And I think that people, I consider myself to be an independent. I used to be more on the left, and now I'm more right-leaning in terms of a lot of the people I dialogue with. We tend to agree with that capitalism good, and in many ways, nationalism good. We love our country. We love individuality. There's a strain of libertarianism that runs through. We love free speech. We love the Second Amendment. But I do continue to hold a lot of views that would be more identified in the false dichotomy, the binary world of left and right. I do hold a lot on the left to this day. For example, I consider myself to be pro-choice. So there's a lot of things out there. But I see, one of the problems that I'm seeing, it bugs me to no end, because the idea that either side of politics, right or left, has the monopoly on science. So you have people on the left, well, we're the smart ones, we're the academics, and I know that a lot of the academics spout the modern religion of social justice, and of course institutions are a modern religion. We can place reason aside and take faith in with academia, media, and state, and certainly follow the money right into believing bullshit because some expert, somebody that has credentials. I'm not big on credentialism. On this channel, we don't really preach credentialism. But someone has credentials, therefore they're right. I think the left is much more likely to do that at this junction. I'm not sure if it's a product of Marxism or collectivism, but it's something. But I see them doing themselves and everyone else a disservice by calling immigrant and illegal immigrant the same thing. Someone that comes here legally, that respects the rules and the laws of the United States of America, they respect the Constitution, they have a higher moral standing than somebody that just comes here and wants free stuff, wants entitlements, however you want to frame it. Somebody that comes here and doesn't respect our code, our laws. Doesn't matter what circumstances they're in, they're on a lower moral standing in terms of the United States. We can talk all day, we can agree and disagree and agree to disagree on the nature of how humanitarian, how humanist it is to let everybody in. Because in a perfect world, I would let everybody in. Oh yeah. If resources didn't have scarcity, if it was just an infinite pile of resources, I would be a bad person. And you would be too. You would be a bad person for not letting people in. If there were no other factors, if there wasn't violence, there's a lot of violent crime, if there weren't drugs being trafficked, humans being trafficked, women and children being trafficked in, it would be great to let everybody in, but we have to screen. We want to have a premium country. We don't want to have a country where anything goes, because that's where you get this thing called, well, chaos. It's not law and order. It's chaos and entropy. But they would say, because they want to fight what they consider to be, apparently, this is how, I'm not projecting or mind reading, but this is how they present it. With their rhetoric, they present it as racist or xenophobic, because you don't want, for me, for example, I don't want people from Poland coming here illegally. That makes me a xenophobe. I'm a xenophobe, folks, because I don't want people coming to my country illegally. Okay? We have laws for a reason, and they're holding this thing together. It's not just this grab bag. So I do say, don't conflate legal and illegal immigrant, but make sure we are treating our fellow man, woman, trans, every human being with dignity and respect. That's the most important part. But we have to look at the situation for what it is. You can come here legally, and we need a better path towards citizenship. We need to work on this, but we are accepting all these people. We're giving out visas, we're giving out green cards, we're giving out all this different stuff. And so we're trying, and we need to have people come, but they have to come in legally. Like the president says, they have to come legally. They can't come here illegally. That can't be the standard. Otherwise, why have laws at all, right? So it's not meant to disrespect anybody, but we just have to maintain order. So, 2 more tweets for you today. You might get more than 2 tweets, but we'll start with that. A lot of good stuff here, but it's very contextual, very context dependent, and we like to make sure these videos are more timeless and don't stick to specifically what was happening at that particular time. So I do want to actually pitch a game here. This game is available now on most of the platforms: Steam, PlayStation 4, Nintendo Switch, and Xbox One. And it's called My Friend Pedro. Now I see My Friend Pedro, I believe it's in the $10 to $20 range. I see it as a spiritual successor to Hotline Miami, which is a very violent game, a top-down game. This game is in side-scrolling 3D, and it has a psychotic banana as your guide instead of whatever intense drugs the Hotline Miami guy was on. Hotline Miami is a very it's a very druggy game. It's a very psychedelic game. It feels like, oh, your character is just taking LSD, or maybe he's on cocaine or something else. Maybe he's just high on weed. I don't know. But it's a very trippy game. So My Friend Pedro is very arcadey, very bloody, and highly replayable. Highly recommended. Check out My Friend Pedro, available now on Nintendo eShop and everywhere else your online games are sold. I appreciate your patience if you're sticking around. Of course, this is a great opportunity to try the 2x speed button and get all of the information in half of the time. To get past these slower points that will be edited out in future segments. Of course, these tweet videos are available later on down the road as segmented with titles for each bit of the video. So I do thank you for watching those. But these here are released warts and all. These tweet videos are long, warts and all. You get everything, the mistakes and everything in between, all the good stuff, all the bad stuff. And I do appreciate you making it this far. We do have 2 more tweets for you today, and thanks for sticking around. So here is another tweet that is very similar in title to a tweet that I did a few weeks ago, really a few months ago on the tweet video, but we actually released a segment called Grouping Thoughts. This is another named tweet that I'm going to unravel for you today and analyze. It's called Group Thought. Group Thought. And it's actually pretty important right now because with this corona outbreak and with everything that's been going on in the election year, we have Bernie Sanders going up against Joe Biden for the nomination. Not looking very good for Bernie. But I think we've seen, and I think many people will agree, that politics, and I hate to say this, but it's becoming everything. Like, opinions are essentially almost assigned by which political team we happen to be on. So I'm Trump positive, for example, right? And so I want the president to be reelected. He hasn't done, I will, of course, change my opinion if he does something that I see as unforgivable or that he deserves to lose. But in general, it's, people stick with their political team until the election's over. But we're seeing a lot of situations where it's essentially 2 movies on one screen, like Scott Adams says, and Scott Adams says on Twitter. And the movie is almost, I would say, 75%. I don't want to put a number on it. 80%, maybe it's Pareto's principle. If you're on the left and Trump says something, you're against it. If you're on the right, Trump says something, you're more likely to be for it. And many people in between, independents like myself, that are now, Trump leaning or Trump positive, we look at it with a broader view, a broader, more balanced view. But at the same time, when you're in election season, you can't really afford to be too nuanced. You kind of have to go with your team, otherwise you're potentially a useful idiot. So here's this named tweet. Group thought. For all intents and purposes, the USA views politics as binary. The silent majority is independent, but we're locked to either red or blue. We can either vote for a Republican, notably for the higher offices such as president, or we can vote for a Democrat. When action is taken for one of the two options to be associated with a negative via media, stereotypes form. Question merit. Question merit. So, this focuses on how the media can basically present one of the two political teams in the United States as evil. Okay? Now, on the right, if you listen to only Fox News and The Blaze, and even things like Breitbart, although Breitbart is a little tiny bit more towards the center, but if you look at these things and it's like a team sport, you have people, the way they describe, if you listen to Sean Hannity, the way that he describes politicians such as AOC and Nancy Pelosi, Bernie Sanders, they're using these terms that truly create a negative, almost hateful image in the heads, in the minds, in the hearts of many in America. This idea that someone is, because they support, say, for example, democratic socialism, which again is, basically a softer way of saying communism. I believe in a mixed model. I think we should have, both sides, capitalism, socialism, and mix it up in the middle. We should have a social safety net on some level, because people, it's better for society. It's better for a premium country to have more people that are not at the very bottom rung. It's better for people not to be destitute. It doesn't help if the streets are, unfortunately littered with things like human feces, as it is the case in San Francisco with the homeless population there spiraling out of control with the bubonic plague looming over them. We don't want to have those kind of people. We want Americans to be taken care of. So I think that there should be some kind of system in place that allows, it gives them a chance. That system includes Social Security, entitlements, Medicare, Medicaid, things that help us, unemployment, disability, Social Security, things that help us maintain society at a cost, national debt, taxes. There's a cost, but I think that, and of course, mixed model also applies to economy, because government, we've actually seen success. The stock market went up. It could be a dead cat bounce, as some people like to say. But the stock market went up when President Trump announced that they were working, the U.S. government and the CDC for coronavirus were working with commercial entities like CVS and Google. When they realized, hey, public, private sector can work together, contracting can take place. I call lobbyists a form of socialism, like when you have like the government owning the means of production, but like there's a thin line between public and private sector. It's a complicated system, but I think mixed model is best. I think capitalism is the bedrock, of course. Capitalism is the bedrock, but at the end of the day, you want to have some socialism, some society can coalesce and come together around some ideas. Like we want to all be able to pay for, they always say, the roads, fire department, police department. Minarchists will agree. You do want to have that basic infrastructure, military, and so forth in place. It's paid for by the people, whether they want to or not, because it's taxes, so it's socialism. See, socialism is a persuasion word. It's a weasel word. It has a definition, but we throw it around so much. And that's what these news companies do, these media companies on the right. They throw it around. And then for better or for worse, you can judge for yourself, but they throw it around. And on the left, of course, we have Republicans are evil, Hitler, they're racist, sexist, xenophobic. We got the president's a misogynist. Now look, you can judge Donald Trump how you will. You all know what he said and what he's done. And a lot of people voted for him anyway. In fact, he became the president of the United States with all of that information available. So it's not like it's a new thing to say that he's, potentially a little bit misogynistic with some of his commentary. How he acts, we don't know. We can only go by testimony from people that want money. I hate to put it that way, but that's essentially what it is. You can never really tell. It's an act of faith to accept that one person acts the way that other people say they do when you haven't witnessed it yourself. But we all know that President Trump was not the cleanest conscience in the world, but that's, immaterial to why many people vote for different politicians. They're going for, in my case, it's economy, foreign policy, and the show. I love the show in politics. Makes it fun, makes us interested. When we're interested in politics, things get done. The American people must remain interested and engaged with people like Trump and AOC and Bernie Sanders. Get the energy up. Otherwise, people will just ignore politics like they did for so many years, and ultimately things will start to happen, and people will just, as a society, will be not aware enough. So back to group thought. For all intents and purposes, the USA views politics as binary. It's true. I'm an independent, but people have come up to me on Twitter, and I actually have a video out. Jeff Tidwell is a grifting, gaslighting fraud. And they've called me a fraud, disingenuous, a both sidesist. They've called me all these different things. And, it's because I didn't just pick a team and stick with it. Now, I advocate for the president. But the Republican Party is, for many years, I've not seen that much of a difference between the Democrats and the Republicans. They're very similar, especially in terms of military, and it's not that different. But the media does present a contrast. They say, well, if they're right-leaning media, they present Republicans as better, as good, moral, upstanding people. And if they're left-leaning media, they say the Democrats are. And it's really about Republican and Democrat, because you might have Libertarian Party, Gary Johnson, you might have Green Party, Jill Stein, you might have all this other parties, but really it comes down to the media and the Republicans and the Democrats. They're all in bed. But we know that there might be a binary system. We might have right and left, false dichotomy, but the silent majority is truly independent. About 44%, 45% of registered voters are independent. And they love their open primaries. We have a primary coming up on the 17th. Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders, and of course, Trump's going to win all the incumbent Republican primary votes. And it's going to be another 4 wins for Trump, because Bill Weld and what's his name? Joe Walsh. Now, why didn't George Conway run? Kellyanne Conway's husband. Why didn't he run? 3D George Conway. So the silent majority is independent, but we're locked to either red or blue. Back in 1992, we had Ross Perot. We had an independent candidate that shook things up. And then we've had, over the years, people like, again, Gary Johnson, Jill Stein, Ralph Nader with the Green Party. And, but ultimately, at the end of the day, most people are going to stick to Democrat or Republican. And they're going to, and of course, if they're very tribal, and they're in that group mentality, that group mind. They're going to associate based on, they're going to read, they're going to go into echo chambers. We're going to do things based on which political party it involves. Because the media does create a negative stereotype over time about both. And that's part of why we say the media is the enemy of the people in many ways. I don't say all media. I say certain media is the enemy of the people for dividing us up. And it's about identity politics. Again, it's about identity politics. You identify as a Republican or a Democrat, a leftist or a right-winger, whoever it might be. You might be a globalist. You might be a nationalist. You might be a libertarian, or you might have some authoritarian tendencies. But they place you into these groups. And especially it's more insidious when those groups happen to be ethnic or involve immutable characteristics. And then there's mutables like a religion, occupation, hobbies. People put you in a group like that. You're a gamer, therefore. You're a Muslim, therefore. You're a Christian, therefore. You're a Hindu. They'll say you're LGBTQAI+, therefore you're male, you're white, you're black. Obviously, we don't want to get into that kind of group mentality because that's not what this channel is all about. We like to focus on the individual. 7+ billion of us folks, all of us with our own perspectives, thoughts, and ideas and vision for the world. So I say here, when action is taken for one of the two options to be associated with a negative via media, stereotypes form, and we have to question the merit of those stereotypes. I mean, of course, certain groups, certain people, certain types of people tend to like certain kinds of things. It's just the way it is, but again, we can't limit ourselves to that frame. We have to look beyond that. Sometimes you really can't judge a book by its cover. You just can't. Things are not what they seem. And so question merit is a sort of double meaning with this tweet because you want to question the merit of stereotypes, but you also want to question the merit of the individual. You don't want to question them by their immutable characteristics or what they do for work. You want to question them on what they bring to the table. Maybe you have some personal judgments to make. Maybe they are in a line of work or they're in some situation, maybe a marriage or a relationship, maybe a friendship. Maybe they're doing something at home. But we want to question each other as individuals, not as stereotypes. Stereotypes are helpful for pattern recognition to make things easier. Sometimes you look at somebody, you look at someone's face, and you go, okay, there's a sort of some behaviors we have a natural inclination to project our thoughts about them. Some things naturally seem to be repetitive patterns, well-defined patterns, and it's easier for us to box things out and create those narrow pathways we talked about earlier in the video where, ultimately we start to label all the things that are bad. We don't want this kind of fruit. We don't like that kind of fruit. So we only get this one. So we've marked that in our mind as bad. We've closed off that pathway. We do that with people. We do that with things. We've been doing that since the beginning of mankind, the dawn of man. We label things that we recognize as problematic or less than preferable or desirable. And then we go ahead and stick with what's good. We just always go with what's good. So we want to question merit. We don't want to question things that can't be changed. And we also want to question the merit of media-driven stereotypes because they're messaging to make us act in a certain way. They're locking the paths we can use to go forward. They're limiting from 10 tracks to 3, 2, 4, hell even 1, and saying, if you don't follow this code, if you don't go with this system, with this choice, then you're a bigot. Then you're a negative person. If you don't go with one of these 3, you'll have guilt by association, guilt by conversation. You can't say this. You can't talk to that person. The media does that. And they do it because they have goals. And those goals aren't readily apparent. They're not always readily apparent. Sometimes they are. Sometimes you kind of know why they're trying to get you to stay away. If the media is saying the Chinese government doesn't want you to say Wuhan virus or China virus, obviously they don't. So why are you advocating on behalf, especially if you're an American media company, why are you advocating on behalf of China? That's not very loyal to me, but hey, we'll question this on a individual basis, person by person. We won't make a broad assumption about all media. We're going to take a look, closer look, climb the pedant tree, and actually observe what's going on, question everything, and figure it out. One more tweet for you today. Okay, so we're talking a lot today about the same topic, which is cultural engineering, social engineering, social justice, modern religion. We've talked about Google. Google's doing a great job helping us handle the coronavirus in America, so kudos to Google. Thank you very much for helping us out. Along with other vendors that have been working with the Trump administration to get things done in America. We really appreciate that. So thank you. But we're going to talk about Google in a less than favorable fashion because Project Veritas last year, with James O'Keefe III as heading the journalistic operation, they are kind of an undercover journalism operation where they go into presidential campaigns and political campaigns. They go into corporations and all these different places, go behind the scenes and, get people. It's kind of gotcha journalism. Some people say it's not journalism, but I say, look, we want a fuller picture of what's going on. Now, I would take things said in private. If someone assumes they were not being recorded and said something in private, I would say that, of course, we should not view things that they intended to be private. We can't change the context from private to public just by sharing it. The same goes for a hot mic or a grab them by the pussy tape, for example, if we're talking about Trump. Because if you heard the kind of things that my friends and I say in group chat, or if we go on our excursions to Maine to hang out and go in the lake and play video games and drink and all this other stuff we do as boys, locker room talk, lots of it. If you took any of that out of context, brought it from private and humorous to public and not so humorous and just sort of literal, the literalists might take it the wrong way, you would never want to speak to me or any of my friends ever again. And hell, after making it this far into the video, you might not want to speak to me again anyway. But I digress. Let's get into our final tweet for today. It's called God Goggle. Social justice is a modern religion. As in traditional religions, such as Hinduism, the word comes in many forms. The word of God. We have books like the Quran. Everyone's listening at Shabbat. Christians see Jesus on toast. I wonder if that's the Jesus from my Twitter story earlier. And social justice gets baked into our tech products. Hashtag Google. So God Goggle. Social justice is a modern religion. So I do have a video out. Social justice is a modern religion. You can check that out on BitChute and YouTube for more about my views on social justice, but essentially it's just a code. Political correctness, we have, of course, different systems, intersectionality, identity politics. Some call it cultural Marxism. I prefer social Marxism. But it's a collectivist ideology in which people are, placed immutably into groups, and it's just determined. It's a very postmodern system where we all have a value. We all have a certain number of points assigned to us, certain values assigned to us, and of course prophets and popes decide, and then disciples of the modern religion go around and enforce it and make sure that they're sticking to code. They are going by the code of that particular sect of the modern religion of social justice. Social justice disciples go around creating martyrs because they turn normal, average people into monsters that they have to fight against to generate equity and equality, and turn the oppressor into the oppressed. And I guess turn the oppressed into the oppressor in the process. You'll have to tell me more. I have other videos out there. Questions for the disciples of the modern religion of social justice. We can certainly get to the bottom of this one of these days. So as in traditional religions such as Hinduism, the word comes in many forms. And we have books like the Quran. Everyone listens at Shabbat. And Christians see Jesus on toast. But now we have something new. Google has gone ahead and baked social justice into our tech products. What that means is that now when you use a Google search, they are using algorithms and other features behind the scenes to ensure equality and equity for all. Even if there may be, for example, and I believe there should be more women in STEM fields. I think that everyone should have equal opportunity to do what they want with their lives. But if there happen to be more men in a field, now of course in the social justice modern religion, men are viewed as the oppressor and women are the oppressed. That's the popular dichotomy there. So in the Google search results, they are suppressing reality. Reality being that there are more men in certain fields than others, in other groups. There are more men than women in certain fields. For example, science. There just are. Now that might have changed. There may be, certainly fact check me, correct me if I'm wrong in the comments below, but there are certainly cases where there are more women in a field or there are more men in a field. And Google doesn't care about that. It goes by the code of the modern religion and says, well, we have to amplify the number of female voices, the number of female results, because otherwise we're not doing our due diligence. We're not going to achieve moral virtue and universal truth by putting out the unfiltered results. No, we're going to have to amend those results with our algorithms and make sure that reality is skewed according to our religious belief system. That's the long and the short of it. So social justice is getting baked into tech products. They are, it's not just social justice, but other modern religions as well, because they're taking, they're using their judgment and taking certain certain users, certain features. They're taking certain apps and certain developers and saying, and certain outlets like InfoWars, and saying, you just can't be here. We're going to censor you off, but allow CNN, who does the same thing, to remain. Censorship is a modern religion, folks, and I'm pretty atheistic on it. Technically agnostic. I think there are some cases where we want to have free speech and others where we don't. But in the case of InfoWars, it's an entertainment product. It's infotainment. I mean, I don't know why Alex Jones isn't back by now. I'm not even a big fan. It just doesn't make any sense to me when you have fake news on all sides of politics going, and then InfoWars is singled out. It doesn't make any sense. But social justice is baked in. Project Veritas, They did do a couple releases on this. Check them out on YouTube. You can see those releases where they show you and they talk to people that know from the inside perspective just how Google has tried to implement social justice into their algorithms. Now, again, there may be good outcomes from this. There may be bad outcomes. I'm not saying that the action itself is necessarily positive or negative, but it certainly isn't the closest thing to truth. It's skewing, engineering culture and our reality, because we believe in reality based on the stimuli we get, the information we receive, right? We're getting a view, a window into reality when we open up Twitter. We're getting a skewed view because they push, Democrat-leaning or left-leaning content. And there's more, I guess, left-leaning people on there. So things trend on Twitter that if you go to any other website may not be trending. It's just that they happen to have that bias. And there's nothing wrong with it, but as long as we're not staying in one echo chamber, and we're using echo chambers as a vacation home and not a permanent place to stay. We actually have our nice home of open dialogue, and then we have echo chambers that are a vacation where we can cognitively rest. We can let our confirmation bias take over for a bit, ease our cognitive dissonance muscles, and enjoy ourselves for just a little bit before venturing back into intellectualism. I believe in that. I think that there should be a refuge for people that just want to have a good time and not have their opinions and their views questioned constantly. There should be a place for that, like a safe space, you could say, but temporary. Vacation home, not permanent. So it is what it is. Religion being baked into products, it is what it is. Notably modern religion, ideology, and reality run on separate interweaving tracks. And frankly, Google has gone ahead and blurred the lines. Godspeed, Google. God goggles on. We'll see what happens. We'll see if there's long-term adverse effect or if there's long-term positive effect. But it is what it is. They have baked social justice into their algorithms. So that's it for today's tweet video. I thank you very much for watching the content today. As always, I can be found on Twitter at RealJeffTidwell. I'm also on Gab, Minds, Telegram, Parler, and Instagram. If you're not watching this video on BitChute, you're watching it on YouTube. Thank you so much, everybody. Another long video for you today. If you enjoyed the content, please leave me a like and a subscribe below. Hey, if you didn't enjoy it, meritocracy rules. Hit me with a downvote. Certainly helps me with that algorithm. Google, are you listening? And leave me a comment below with your thoughts and observations on the content that you heard today. I look forward to speaking with you. And as I always say, everything I said today might be wrong. Or everything I said today might be right. Perhaps the truth lies between some of what I said was wrong and some of what I said was right. So, thank you very much again for watching. I will see you next time, and I hope you have a great weekend.